Hi, I'm Amanda and I should probably be reading, but today I'm talking about the best books I read in 2024. Welcome back to my channel. It's a new year, 2025, which what better way to start out the new year than by looking back at the previous year. Also, sorry if my voice sounds weird throughout this video. I've been sick and I didn't want to put off filming anymore. I wanted to get back into it. So if I sound like I ate a frog at some point, I'm terribly sorry. We'll start off with just a couple quick stats. I read, I think, 78 or 79 books last year. There's one I'm not sure made it on the list, but about that, pretty good. More than my goal, which was nice for a change. And of those 79 books, 20 were novels, short stories, things in print. The rest were graphic novels and manga. So today we're only talking about the print books, the things with words on a page and few, if any, pictures. Mostly because I find it, I was looking at my graphic novels and manga, and for the most part, I think they're going to be difficult to rank in terms of best of. There's series that I already liked that I'm continuing, and I didn't read that many one-shots or start that many new things last year. So I don't know that I'm going to do a top 10 list for the graphic content, for the graphic novels and manga, but I definitely wanted to do one for the print books that I read. There's no good way to differentiate that. Because you can't say novels and graphic novels, because not everything I read was a novel. Some of them were short story collections, and if I read it in nonfiction, it could be in here too. So, I don't know. Is there a better descriptor for that, of non-graphic novels? Is there a better word for that? I know for some people it's just books, but graphic novels are books too. So, I don't know. I'm kind of stuck, but that's what we're talking about today. Just some clarity getting into it. So, of those, I read 20, and I guess I'm just going to call them books because it's the easiest way to talk about it. So, discounting the graphic novels and manga, I read 20 books last year for an average rating of 3.45, which is lower than I thought it would be, although it makes sense. I was very interested in seeing when I looked, and I was debating if I was even going to make this video. I had exactly 10 books that were 4 stars or higher, and exactly 10 that were 3 stars or lower. I don't do half stars or quarter stars. I'll probably do a video at some point about my rating system, and what I think would actually be my ideal system would be something like a 7-point scale, which I know sounds crazy, but we'll see. If you're interested in that, let me know. But for now, I think a 5-star system is perfectly fine. I don't really want to add half stars because I think 10 is a lot, and I don't really have like 10 divisions of things I want to put books into. So for me, 5 stars works best. I very rarely give 1 stars. A book has to be it has to really make me mad to get a 1 star. And I don't give a lot of 2 stars because I'm generally reading things I think I will enjoy. And last year that worked out pretty well. Half of the things I read were 4 stars and above, which is great. And for me, a 3 star isn't bad. A 3 star is just kind of a meh, yeah, that was okay. I'm not angry I read it. I'm not super chomping at the bit for the next in the series, but it was fine. But since I had exactly 10 4 and 5 stars, that seemed like a really good place to make the division of talking about a best of books for last year. So in this video, I'll be going through my top 10 books in a tentative order. There's a couple here that I feel could change places the farther I get away from them, but I think I'm pretty happy with the ranking that I ended up coming up with for them. So without further ado, let's get to the books. At number 10, I have Out There Screaming, which is a short story collection edited by Jordan Peele. I picked this book up for the Literally Dead Book Club last year, which is hosted by Kayla over at Books and Lala. I did really good at the start of the year reading the books for the book club and did worse later on, but I think this was the February pick, I think last year. So I picked this one up, read it, was there for the live show. I remember it wasn't very popular in the live show. A lot of people didn't really gel with a lot of the story. And I think part of that might just be that this wasn't the type of horror a lot of people were hoping for. A lot of it was more supernatural horror and things that I think maybe wasn't the type of horror people were hoping would be in this collection. But for me, who's a horror newbie, this was a good enough intro to the genre that I really enjoyed it. The one thing about this collection, there were 2 stories in here I gave 1 star to. I remember one of them, and even when I was looking over my Goodreads data where I logged my feelings on each story, I still didn't remember the other one that I gave 1 star to, so that one was apparently very forgettable, as well as being really terrible. I didn't give any 2 stars. 7 stories in here I gave 3 stars to. I had 6 4-star stories and 4 5-star stories. And I have to say, before I looked over my Goodreads data, I could remember maybe 3 stories from this book. A lot of these did not have staying power. They didn't really stick with me. I don't even remember all the stories I gave 5 stars to in this one. Again, I could look it up and I'd probably be like, oh yeah, I really like that one. But off the top of my head, it's just not there. To see the rating for a short story collection, what I usually do is add up my rating for all of the stories and do an average. So this one, the stories were averaged to 3.5 and I rounded that one up to a 4. But it was right on the bubble, and for me that's why this is number 10. It was right on the bubble of being a 4-star. Could have gone down to a 3-star with one weaker story. But I did enjoy this one. At number 9, I have another short story collection, 50 Beasts to Break Your Heart by Jenna Rose Nethercott. This was a cover buy. I picked this up because the cover was pretty. I like foxes and I love everything going on here. It seemed whimsical and kind of like folklore and fun. It wasn't quite what I was hoping for. That said, it did still have quite a few successes. None of the stories in this book got a 1 or a 2-star. Everything here was a 3 or above. 6 of the stories were 3 stars, 4 were 4 stars, and 4 were 5 stars, for an average of 3.8. Which does put this one higher than Out There Screaming. But I do remember several of the stories in this one. I remember things I liked and things I didn't like. I remember the stories that confused me as well as the stories that really grabbed me. This being a collection by one author, I think gives it a little more cohesion. I so wish more authors would put in a foreword or even an afterword that gave some context to the stories, what they were hoping to achieve, what they wrote them for, the kinds of things that they were thinking about, that they were hoping to pass along with the story, what inspired them to write it. I wish more authors would do that because I tend to enjoy story collections that do that a lot more than ones that don't. Because even if I don't quite get a story, finding out the context around the story can really give me that extra push I need to go, okay, I kind of see what they were going for now. Whereas when they don't, I'm just kind of left going, I know I'm missing something. I don't know what it is, but I definitely know I'm missing something. And unless the author has talked about it somewhere, I watched a Q&A with this author, hoping that they might talk about 1 or 2 of the stories that I was kind of unclear on, and they didn't. So I was just still lost and stuck. I wish more short story collections would do that because I think that would have made this one better for sure. But I would definitely recommend picking this one up, maybe from a library. Short story collections are always hit or miss, but this one did have a good number of hits for me. Next, we have the only book of my top 10 that I did not read physically, so I do not have a physical copy, and that's The Demon of the Lonely Isle by Edogawa Rampo. I was doing quite a bit of reading of Rampo for a tag I got tagged in last year that I still haven't completed, and I'm very sorry, and I hope to get to it soon. But I wanted to read and reread some more Rampo before I did it, and this is the only one that made the top 10, so the other ones were fine, but this is the one that stood out more than the others. Rampo is a Japanese author who was publishing in the 1920s to the 1960s, and he tended to write horror and mystery and spooky, shocking stories. This novel is a story of a man who is... The framing device is that he's so tired of telling everyone the story of why his hair, though he is fairly young, his hair is completely white. And he tells everyone he went through a shocking endeavor when he was younger, and he's so tired of telling the story, he's going to write it all down so that he can just hand it to people so he doesn't have to keep telling the story of what happened to him. So we get drawn into a story of murder and betrayal and intrigue. When you read older mysteries and things, because so much has been built on older mysteries, a lot of times it's not hard to predict where certain things are going, but I still thought this one was fairly successful in taking you on this journey, and I was very surprised by, they start out telling you that 2 people are going to be murdered, and I thought, well, okay, that's most of the plot right there. And that was done probably about halfway through, and I was like, okay, what's the rest of the book? Like, we had a locked room mystery, we had an intrepid detective, and then we were done with all of that. And it was like, okay, but what's next? So the book does have some problems. Anytime you read a more classic book, you're going to have some depictions of groups and people that are not correct or flattering. And that is, of course, something you either don't read classic literature for or you kind of just have to expect. This book does have some interesting representation that you might not expect for the era. It's just not entirely done well. This book would be much better if one scene was removed, and reading the comments, the other reviews on Goodreads, I can see that I'm not alone in wishing that this one part of the book just didn't happen. It really muddies the waters and makes me wonder what on earth we were even trying to say about this character. But that one part removed, the book is fairly solid. If you enjoy older mysteries and reading more classic books or Japanese literature at the time, you might pick it up. If you're looking for something more modern, give it a pass. Next, at number 7 is The Grimoire of Grave Fates, created by Hannah Alcath and Margaret Owen. This book might be higher on the list than it strictly deserves to be. Let me explain. I picked this book up solely on the strength of the concept and the cover. The cover's really cool. I like the colors. It's very fun. What this book is a collection of short stories that tells one story. Each short story is set within an hour and follows a different character. And through those hours, in the very first one, the body is discovered, and by the end, we figure out who the murderer is. When I read that this was going to be 18 different authors telling one story, I was intrigued. I thought that sounded amazing. And it mostly works. There's a reason this isn't a 5-star. I am fairly nitpicky, especially when it comes to mysteries. And I feel like this is successful enough that if you aren't as nitpicky as me, this is going to really work for you. I really liked the diverse voices in these books. You get a lot of different cultures represented, and all of them, I believe, are own voices from the authors. So you get a lot of different things represented and their take on magic. The magic in this book is very freeform. You can tell that the creators told the authors, hey, however you want magic to work, it works. Just explain how your magic works, and that's enough. You don't have to, we're not dealing with mana, we're not dealing with wands, we're not dealing with magic words. If you want your character to do magic words, great. If you want your character to have a wand, great. If you want to draw mana from the earth, go for it. But none of those things are consistent through the book. Different people use magic in different ways. And I kind of love that. It kind of gives the school this like chaotic feeling of like all of these kids coming from all over the world and being just like, I have no idea what to do, and my magic doesn't work like his magic, so what do I do? Which is really fun. This idea of all these kids coming together and kind of having to piece their magic together and really like focus in on honing their individual skills. And that way everyone's kind of special in that their magic is unique. Some of the magic systems in this are just beautifully described. I still remember some of them, even though I think I read this in February of last year. I remember a lot of these characters. The problem comes, of course, with the mystery. And therefore with I would say, the editing of the stories together. The big problems with this are that if you enjoy a character in this book, you may never see them again after their one chapter. For example, the character in the very first chapter, I don't think we ever see again. The character in the second chapter does show up again, but doesn't sound like himself. Like, he speaks in a very specific way in his chapter, but when he shows up again under another author, it's clear there wasn't any collaboration there other than getting the name of that character and what they had learned. There isn't any collaboration between the authors to try to make sure that that student sounds the way they sounded in their chapter, which is really unfortunate. I think the editors probably wanted to keep hands off of the individual stories and not hold too tight on them, but that does weaken the whole because things feel inconsistent. There's at least one point in the book where someone says, oh yeah, I saw this earlier. And based on my reading of the chapter, that's impossible. They're basically underground for several hours, and there's no way they could have seen the other character where they were, given the timing of everything going on. That's just impossible. Or maybe even that happened afterward. I can't remember. There were a couple things in the book that I was just like, no, you're ruining it. Different chapters contribute more to the mystery. Some contribute a lot less, which makes sense. This isn't one group of 18 students. These are just 18 individuals at the school, some of whom seem to know each other and others who don't. And the mystery itself is fine. I don't really feel like you can figure out too much of this, but if you can get past the mystery not being mind-blowing and there being some inconsistencies in how characters appear between chapters and a few inconsistencies in the timing of unimportant details, the individual pieces of this are really great. I think one of the best things for this book could have been, in between each chapter, there is some material like the announcement that was done over the PA or the transcription of a text chain between a bunch of students, most of whom are not point of view characters, just random students at the school. And that really made me think that this book would have been a lot stronger if that text message chain could have been carried through with the other characters from the book, so that you got to see characters from previous chapters popping in and saying, oh, I just learned this. Has anyone heard from so-and-so? I'm really worried about this person who I talked to earlier. Has anyone talked to him? Just to get them popping in. And each of those could have been written by the authors themselves. They could have gotten into a big group chat and had a text chain as their characters. And I feel like that would have made it a little more cohesive and given you those characters from the beginning having a reason to be here and still be relevant. Each character does kind of learn or see or encounter something, but they're not really helping each other. They're not really working together, other than maybe a few students near the end who are actually teaming up to accomplish something. So it does just kind of feel like randomly moving about between these students throughout the day. I wish it had been a tiny bit more cohesive. I think this could have been a 5-star, but the concept is so strong and it comes so close to accomplishing its lofty goals that I still stuck it at a 4. For people who are as nitpicky as me, they might not like this. This might not quite work for you. It might be down to a 3. And if you're really critical on your mysteries or your consistency, and you're not as sold on the concept as I was, I could see this being a 3 for you or worse. But I really enjoyed it, and it's not one I've seen talked about anywhere. This is one I came across. This is one actually my husband came across in a bookstore and was like, oh, check this out. And I was like, yeah, we're taking that home. That sounds amazing. At number 6, I have The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. I had previously read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and loved all of it except the ending. The ending was fine, but the time travel shenanigans were exactly my bag. So I loved that part of the book, which was the majority of the book. So I was excited to pick up this one. There's another book by Stuart Turton I haven't read yet, but after this one, I'll probably be looking for that one fairly soon. I read this one for Summerween. I believe I read this one for Summerween because it was supposed to be taking place during the summer, and I had seen people post it as taking place during the summer, so I believed them. And I believe very early in the book it says that it's October. And I was so frustrated. Let me see. Yeah, on the very in the first chapter it says it's October. So it's definitely not a book set in the summer. But at that point I wasn't changing my mind, so I read it anyway. But this is essentially a mystery where everyone in the books, memory gets erased of the previous evening. We get some establishing scenes of how life works on the island that is apparently the last place left on Earth. The inhabitants, we meet our main players, and then everybody wakes up the next day and no one remembers what happened the previous evening. Everyone is a blank. And the reason this happens is everyone has an AI in their brain, the same AI, and the AI is helpful and not, which is very interesting. So everyone is stuck going, oh, and there's a murder. They don't remember what happened the previous night, and there's been a murder. So everyone's fairly invested in figuring out what happened. This is a big deal, but nobody knows anything, and everyone is also kind of thinking, oh no, did I do it? I couldn't have done it. But what if I did it? I don't remember. So you have this very interesting play where people are trying to figure out what happened, but nobody knows what their role in anything could have been. They're stumbling across clues and things that lead them to figuring out what they did, but no one knows what's relevant or not because no one remembers anything. And that was just a very interesting idea. My friends and I did a dinner party in grad school where you like get your character and you read all the things you know, and then you have to talk to each other, and then you have to try to figure out who the murderer is based on the things you've said to each other. There's some inconsistencies, and you have to try to figure out who the murderer is, and not even the murderer knows who they are. So at the end, you have to be like, I think it was me. It's kind of like that, but on like a grander scale, because instead of being 6 people sitting around a kitchen table, it's an entire island of people. I did figure out the very final twist of this one before we got to the big reveal, but I didn't feel it completely spoiled the book or anything, and there were a few letdowns just in how I thought the mystery solving was going to go. There were some things that I thought were going to be very significant and play out in a very investigation heavy way, and it's not quite the way the book played out, which isn't the book's fault. My expectations are not the book's problem. But I still really enjoyed this one. My husband gave it a 5-star. Spoilers for if he ever talks about it. But if you enjoy weird sci-fi mysteries, I would definitely recommend this one. It's a solid pick. At number 5, we have Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto. I really liked this book. This was another one I read for the Literally Dead Book Club. This one I believe was for March. And this one is just a fun found family murder mystery. Vera is a lonely old lady who's kind of nosy. She's kind of set in her ways and thinks she's right about everything, and annoyed that her son doesn't call her more often, and very set in how she does her daily routine every day. And then that daily routine is thrown off when she wakes up to discover a body in her tea house. And Vera does what anyone would do. She disturbs the scene, pockets a flash drive, cleans up a little bit before the cops get there. So Vera decides that she's going to try to solve this murder because she's sure she can do a better job than the police. She's sure the police aren't doing it the way they do it on the TV shows. So clearly these police are incompetent. So she's going to show them all how by solving this for them. Part of how she does that is she waits to see who comes by her tea house because she's convinced that the killer will return to the scene of the crime. So she gathers her suspects of all these people who come to the tea house and sits them down and makes them talk about themselves. But what ends up happening is she just gets to know all these people who have different reasons for kind of looking into this murder and being involved with the victim. And she ends up creating this kind of just lovely little found family. And while you're reading it, you're like, oh no, I really hope none of them's the murderer because I love them all. I won't spoil the ending, although I did figure out the ending fairly early on just because I know how mystery books work. There's a detail I picked up on because I was like, they wouldn't include that unless it was important, would they? No, that's important. And it was. But I don't feel it spoiled the book at all. I just really loved the characters. I was thrilled to find out that there's a second book in this series coming out, I think later this year, and I will definitely be reading it. The characters are wonderful. I would definitely recommend giving this one a pick up if you like cozy mysteries. This one was really fun. Next, at number 4, we have Dungeons and Drama by Christy Boyce. This book is exactly what it wants to be and exactly what it says it is. And for me, that was enough for it to be a 4-star because I liked everything it said it was, and it did it well. This is a young adult romance about a D&D nerd, board game nerd, and a girl who loves Broadway musicals, and I am both of those things. So I related very strongly to both of these characters in different ways. This is Riley and Nathan. Riley is sentenced to work in her father's board game store because of an infraction she committed of driving a car without permission or a license. So to teach her a lesson, she has to work in her father's board game store, where she meets Nathan, who is also a worker there, and gets roped into playing D&D. And it kind of presents itself as enemies to lovers, but these two don't have any reason to be enemies. They're more just like unhappy acquaintances at the beginning of the book. But they do become friends, and one of my favorite tropes is they are fake dating. And through their fake dating, they kind of realize that maybe they're enjoying it a little too much. Even though there's a reason they're fake dating is to make other people jealous. So there's a goal is to get those people to see how happy they are so that maybe they can get with those people again. At least for Nathan. It's silly. It's the problems in this book are very teenage problems. There's a dance that they're worried about, and they're worried about the spring show. And the stakes are very low. They are very high school. And sometimes that's what you want. I was kind of in a place where I didn't want to read about world-ending problems or huge societal issues being dealt with. I wanted to read about two nerds having fun together and falling in love. And that's what I got from this. It's very sweet. There is another book coming out in the series, but it doesn't follow these characters or any of their social circle to my knowledge. So I'll probably pick it up, but I'm a little nervous. I'm hoping it is as strong as this one because I did really like this one. If you're looking for a young adult pick, if this sounds good, it's going to be good. If you're not interested in what I described, you're not going to like this book. It is not a paragon of literature, but it is exactly what it says it is, and it does all of the things it sets out to do very well. At number 3, I have When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. I really liked this book. I talked about it a bit in my mid-year freakout tag, so I won't go on about it too much, but this is a tiny little book that I wish was 3 times as long. I wish a new book in this series would come out every year. I really liked the this book draws on Polish mythology, which I'm not sure I had ever read before. It led to me Googling what some of these creatures they're talking about look like, so I could have in my head what on earth they were talking about. But it was so good. The magic was so clear. The creatures were very compelling. I immediately loved the characters in this book, and I just want to read more and more and more about them. I'm so sad that this book is so short, and I really hope she comes back to these characters at some point. I don't think she has any plans to. Last I checked, which was a while ago, there wasn't anything announced in terms of this being a series. This was just a quick little standalone. But man, do I hope that she comes back to this at some point, because I would read a novella a year of these characters easy. I loved them. I loved the magic. I loved the world. It's amazing what she was able to accomplish in such a short little book. It got 4 stars from me just because there was a little rushed with some romance near the end and a few things that just didn't play out given how short it was. But overall, incredibly strong. My strongest 4-star by far. Really liked When Among Crows. So I finished filming the video a while ago and I just looked it up, and it turns out that When Among Crows is becoming a series. It's the Cursebearer series, and book number 2 is going to be out in September, called To Clutch a Razor. I'm so excited. I really hope it lives up to my hype. I hope it is just as good as the first. It does look like it's about 100 pages longer than the first, if the early Goodreads report is to be believed. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more of what I love, and it is just as fulfilling as the first one was for me. That means a bunch of books on this list have sequels coming out this year, and I couldn't be more excited. Now it's just trying to find the time to read them. And finally, my 2 5-star picks of the year. I probably talked about both of these in my mid-year freakout tag too, so I won't belabor the point too much. Number 2 is Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. I think I still like the first book of this series a little better. You really should read them in order. If you read this book first, you will ruin several aspects of the first one to where it will not be as satisfying to read it if you read it second. So I definitely recommend picking up this series. But I do think, although I like the first one a little better because I liked the aspect with his family being involved, this one focuses on mystery authors instead of his family. He's on a convention set on a train that is a bunch of mystery writers and their fans, and someone ends up dead, and of course, as the title says, everyone on the train is a suspect. It's got a locked room mystery, a bunch of different people who think they should be able to solve the crime, and some really interesting meta context about, like, at this point in a mystery novel, we've had the murder. At this point in the mystery novel, we've established all the suspects. At this point in the mystery novel, we've given some clues. At this point in the mystery novel, everything turns on its head. So it has some fun meta commentary the same way the first one did. And Ernest is just a really fun narrator. As a narrator, he is someone who is trying to write a book. In this book, he has written a book, it being the first book in the series, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, which in the world of the book is his memoir of this horrible series of murders he got caught up in. So he's trying in this book to write a second book and having a lot of trouble. And so he's talking a lot about the form of mystery novels and how a mystery novel works, and that it should include some puzzles and should include some things. So if you liked the meta aspect of the first one, where it told you like the rules of mystery novels and stuck to them, this one does the same thing, only kind of on an even more meta scale. I think this one is the better mystery. It was more cohesive and I feel more solvable. There were a lot more aspects of this one you could pick out instead of just having to have them revealed to you. But I still think I like the first one a little better. But regardless, this one was still 5 stars. I highly recommend picking up this series if you like mysteries. So much fun. The first book was comped to us as Knives Out meets Clue. And I definitely feel that works as an elevator pitch. If that sounds like something that sounds good to you, don't delay. Pick up this series. You won't regret it. And finally, again, if you watched my mid-year freakout tag, this won't be a surprise. My number 1 book of 2024 was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I just really like this book. This is one of those I should have more to say, but I really don't. I just love the characters. Emily is a wonderfully unique person who does things in a very certain ways that might not make sense to you if you were making the decision. But once you learn who Emily is, all of her decisions make sense for her to make. One of the things I often describe is there's a point in this book where Emily does something very cool. She does something very clever and then immediately makes a terrible decision. And although you're like, no, Emily, don't do that. Why would you do that? You understand Emily enough by that point that you're like, yeah, of course you're going to do that. You shouldn't do that. But of course that's what Emily would do. And I feel like that's just such a strong way to write a character when you can understand why they're making perhaps the wrong choice. It's very good writing. I like Wendell. I like the banter between her and Wendell and her fluster against him at the beginning and like, why are you here? I don't want you here. And her insistence that he's her only friend. I enjoy them as a couple. I enjoy their banter. I really look forward to reading more in the series and seeing where they go and how they develop. One thing I really like about this book in terms of it being a series is sometimes when you have books in a series. I have another book I read that I won't talk about now because I read it this year. But I read a book that's the beginning of a duology, and it is basically all rising action and then just stops. It doesn't have any resolution to the plot of the first book. It's all rising action to get into the second book where there will continue to be rising action and the falling action will all be in the second book. It kind of resolves like an arc, but not enough to like resolve it fully. This book, although you still have a lot of questions about what Emily and Wendell are going to do about Wendell's issues and what's going to happen with the relationship between them, The issue, they go to an island and are dealing with the fairy population there, and those issues are all fully dealt with in this book. You get a full story. So even though you're hoping to have more of the character, you want to see more of their interactions together, you want to see where things go next, you get a complete story in this book, and that is so important, I feel, for series to really draw me in, is that I need to see the whole action in one book. So this book does tell a complete story. You could stop reading here and be completely fine with the story that you read. Or I think in most people's cases, if you enjoy the characters, you're going to want to keep going and seeing what they get into next. I have the next book in the series, and we will surely pick up the third book as it comes out this year. So I'm really looking forward to reading more of Emily Wilde in 2025. But it was my best book of 2024. That's it for me. Like the video if you did. Subscribe to tell YouTube you want to see more of me for some reason. And leave me a comment down below. Have you read any of these books? Are you adding any of them to your TBR? What were your best books of the year? Let me know down below. I'd love to see more books that I need to add to my TBR. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next chapter. Bye. Yes.